Hey, welcome to ScreenCrush Rewind. I'm Ryan Airy. Let's talk about The Mandalorian, Episode 6 of Season 3. I think this is going to be one of the most controversial episodes of Star Wars since Boba Fett took a bubble bath for 4 episodes in a row. A little later, I'm going to be joined by 2 friends, Paul from Heavy Spoilers and Heather Antos from IDW Comics. But first, here's what I think of the episode. I'm going to talk about 3 things: the story, the cameos, and the Darksaber. I think casual fans of Star Wars are really going to like the most basic story of this episode, with Din and Bo-Katan solving mysteries at Epcot Center. It follows a familiar trope that we've seen in shows like Law & Order or True Detective, a buddy cop show where 2 law enforcement officers go around different locations interviewing witnesses and suspects who are in the middle of their daily lives, until an autopsy finally reveals the final truth. This genre was also parodied brilliantly in the show Community.
I can also help. As a psych major, I could what am I to do?
I'm going to ignore that for now. Now, like I was saying, even though these tropes are so well worn, it was fun to see them in Star Wars. It felt like more of a return to Season 1, where episodes delved into genres like a Kurosawa film, westerns, and jailbreak films. Star Wars has always combined genres like samurai, western, fighter pilot action movies, war epics, political thrillers, into just one saga. It's why Star Wars is so successful. It's familiar and new, more steeped in nostalgia than a baseball game.
Ow! You just lost your membership at Video Spot! Dang it.
For this episode, Christopher Lloyd's motivations were a little unclear, but like, who really cares? It was a fun cameo because he was able to disappear into this role. Even though Christopher Lloyd is mostly known for playing Doc Brown in Back to the Future, he can play other parts, and I didn't think he was much of a distraction. Whereas Lizzo and Jack Black were major distractions who were mostly playing themselves. Now, Jack Black is great, very talented, and he excels at playing people who act exactly like Jack Black. Even in the sedated and underrated rom-com The Holiday, he can't separate the actor from the role.
That was accidental. Accidental boob grace.
But major movie stars have shown up in Star Wars before. Liam Neeson, Harrison Ford, Woody Harrelson.
And Forrest Whitaker, yes, I know, but those actors were able to disappear into the universe. But Jack Black is a presence. It's like if Barack Obama or Donald Trump showed up in a Star Wars movie, they would take you out of the world.
Yeah, like Ed Sheeran in Game of Thrones.
For hands of gold are always cold, but a woman's hands are warm.
Exactly. And Lizzo, she's just Lizzo. I mean, she's great, but she's never not gonna be Lizzo, you know? But here's the thing, I didn't mind these cameos that much. I mean, they set a tone for the episode, that it was going to be fun.
This is where the fun begins.
Star Wars is supposed to be fun and goofy sometimes. We can have dark melodrama in the same universe where, like, Han acts like a goofball.
Laugh it up, fuzzball.
Well, that's it. My life is over.
Dude, what is your problem?
I got a big date tonight and I need a haircut. Oh, I look a fright.
Oh, is that all? I'll cut your hair.
Oh my God, thank you. You keep a pair of hair trimmers around like that?
Absolutely. This is the Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer from Manscaped. This trimmer is great for cutting the hair on your sensitive areas. It has ceramic blades and a skin-safe guard, plus a 4000K LED spotlight so you can see into the shadowy nether areas where you might be trimming. I think you know, it's easy to hurt yourself if you don't have the proper tools.
Wait, so is that a trimmer for your balls?
It sure is, buddy, and you look great. Now, the 4.0 package also features the Weed Whacker nose hair trimmer, which has this proprietary skin-safe technology which helps reduce nicks, skags, and tugs in those delicate nose holes. Both of these are water resistant, so you could use them in the shower.
Yeah, but I just touched my head.
Don't worry, buddy. If you need to clean up, you can also use the shampoo and conditioner, which I use every day. There's the body wash and the Crop Preserver ball deodorant and the Crop Reviver. Here, try this. Very invigorating, right?
What has my life become?
More than 8 million men worldwide use Manscaped, and that's why we partnered up with them for this video. When you use the code ScreenCrush in the description, you get 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com. Unlock your confidence and always use the right tools for the job with Manscaped, the sponsor of this video. Now get out there and kiss that puppet lady.
You got it.
But what's harder to forgive is how the episode has totally fumbled the storyline about the Mandalorians and the Darksaber.
Fumbled, I say. There shall be a reckoning, a totaling of sums.
Oh, easy, buddy. It's a show about space wizards, but still, it was annoying. See, the season 2 finale did an amazing job of setting us up for a new season. Grogu was off with Luke Skywalker. Din Djarin had just accidentally become king of Mandalore by winning the Darksaber in combat, kind of like Arthur accidentally pulling the sword from the stone. I mean, this seemed to be setting up a conflict between him and Bo-Katan, or his sect against Bo-Katan's sect. And on top of that, he took off his helmet and was no longer even on the same religious path he was before. And then, one by one, each of these awesome plot points was peacefully resolved. Din was reunited with Grogu on a different show.
Like a panther. Yes,
The armor does not expel Din from the clan, she just gives him a pretty easy to solve quest.
In my heart.
And when Din meets Bo-Katan, she's all sad and doesn't even seem to care about having the Darksaber anymore.
Wave that thing around, and they'll do whatever you say.
And look, I try not to criticize something based on what's not there. Like, I hate when people dislike a movie or a show because it didn't follow their fan theory. But this was like all conflict that was clearly being set up and it led nowhere. We're told that the Darksaber is important, but we never see anyone treat it with any reverence. Like, wouldn't Axe Woves have challenged Din for it if Din is like such an outcast to them?
A misguided zealot possesses the blade. One, I might add, who has not one drop of Mandalorian blood in his veins.
I mean, Din also tried to use the Darksaber. He kind of heard about its importance, but then he couldn't use the Darksaber very well, so he stopped trying because he didn't care about using it. And then Din gave it up on a technicality. So like, if I'm gonna armchair quarterback here, as soon as Bo-Katan and Din Djarin arrived at the Mandalorian camp, Bo should have turned directly to Din and challenged him for the saber in front of everyone. Kind of like almost turned on him, fought him tooth and nail for it, but instead, he found a technicality for her and he handed it over. And the rules of the Darksaber, they make no damn sense. I have tried to spell them out on this show, but it's so hard to work out. Like if Obi-Wan or Palpatine or Ahsoka should have the damn thing because each of them beat Darth Maul in a duel at different times. There are hundreds of ways they could have resolved this conflict, and instead, they just redid the scene from Rebels when Sabine handed it over to Bo and then she reignites it. There's even the same wide shot from underneath to make her look regal. Look, I'm sure this show is gonna end great. We're gonna see Moff Gideon, Thrawn, maybe like Leia or something, and overall, I really like this episode, I really like this season. I just think it could have been much better. But that's just my thoughts. Now I'm joined by two of my favorite people. We have Paul from the channel Heavy Spoilers, and we have Heather Antos, Senior Editor at IDW Comics. So Paul, you've been pretty vocal online about your feelings on this episode and this season in particular. What do you think about this episode? Where did it work for you? Where did it not work?
It sucked. Me and Greg Alba, friend of the channel, Real Rejects.
Shut the f*** up, Ryan Airy!
Sometimes we text each other after an episode, and we both pretty much text each other at the exact same time saying, worst episode ever. Now, I'm not like some negative, get woke, go broke, I hate all Star Wars fan, but I do think that this kind of squandered the potential, and with this just having 2 episodes left, I think they really dropped the ball. Now, from the start, they have that weird Quarren and Calamari scene, which I don't even know what that was in like what that meant. People have been saying it's kind of meant to be a metaphor for Jack Black and Lizzo, but okay, we'll cut that scene anyway and it still works. And I thought when the light cruiser came in that they were gonna talk about what happened with Moff Gideon last week. You know, that was the big cliffhanger. Moff Gideon, some Mandalorians are somehow involved with what's happened to him. So when they showed up in a cruiser that he's once flown, Mandalorians, I'm thinking, oh yeah, we're gonna find out. It's gonna be a big heist movie, gonna save Moff Gideon. And then it just kind of from there went to this weird society if meme, where they kind of landed on like this paradise, this socialist paradise almost. And it really got goofy.
You are now a knight.
I mean, I think this season's had such a serious tone to it. If you look at like episode 2, that's almost like a horror movie. The whole thing with the Darksaber, you know, what it means to be Mandalorian, the splitting of the tribe, and even in this episode, they did have some good themes. Like, I love the fact that the AI, the droids, are worried about getting replaced by humans, because a lot of humanity's fear at the moment is that we're all going to get replaced by AI. So then to see robots being like, I hope we don't get replaced by humans, that's a nice little thing. But it was just to be squandered by stupid cameos. Jack Black, like the guy, love him. Lizzo, you know, not a massive Lizzo fan, but weird seeing them in Star Wars. Just very strange. Kind of took me out of it, especially with how serious the season's been so far.
All right, Paul, really good to get your broad take on things. Heather, what did you're somebody I think who loves Star Wars but is sometimes disappointed in it. What was your take on this episode?
Gee, I think that puts it pretty accurately. No, I thought this episode was just the most wild, bizarre fever dream. I don't know what I watched. It was really fun. I definitely understand why, all the cameos could be off-putting to people, and I agree, Paul. It was such a out of left field turn to have this almost goofy 1930s noir type of story pop out of nowhere. I thought it was a lot of fun. However, this kind of, Ryan, goes back to what we've been discussing in the previous talkbacks of I feel to truly understand and appreciate the story they're trying to tell, you've had to have consumed 15 years of Star Wars, right? To just really appreciate everything going on with The Mandalorian, really appreciate that moment with Bo-Katan and the Darksaber, and as you said, they're really squandering some opportunities, I think that some of the most important storytelling and some of the most important details to these characters in this show are happening off screen. And it's so much wasted real estate. I wished episode 2 was episode 1. I wish the last week's episode was episode 3, and I wish this episode was episode 4, and then the rest of the series could be taking back Mandalore. As you said, Paul, we have 2 episodes left and a lot of questions. What happened to Moff Gideon? What's going on with the Perishane, right? All of that episode that we had. Can we take back Mandalore in 2 episodes? And will Din Djarin save IG? IG-11? That storyline we haven't visited since episode 1. So yeah, it was super fun and really cool to see. I mean, Lord knows I love me some droids, and I could live in that droid bar all day long, and just give me a whole series of that. I thought that was really fun.
Yeah. So what did you think about Bo-Katan getting the Darksaber back? Because that was another thing I kind of had a problem with, if I'm being honest.
I liked that she got it back. I found it in such an anticlimactic way. I feel like if there had been more tension building up to that moment, and they had really made that part of her emotional internal struggle for these 6-7 episodes, that would be that. Then it would mean something, right? But we just kind of have episode 2 where she's like, meh, you have the Darksaber, so they won't follow me. And then, this episode, you have the Darksaber, and you can't just give it to her. And Din's like, Spock logic game for you. It's yours now.
Yeah, that was one of my issues, because the way I feel like they didn't have the balls to do what they should have done, which is have Mando versus Bo. They've been kind of setting up this big, civil wars are a big part of Mandalorian history. I thought that they were going to Game of Thrones it, where you'd sort of be rooting for Dany, you'd be rooting for Jon Snow, only one of them can rule, and it puts them into conflict and just leads to this big thing where Jon has to kill Dany, spoiler alert. And instead they kind of chickened out of that and were like, well, we can both be winners, here's the Darksaber. Whereas, Mando's being criticized as not being a true Mandalorian, and a true Mandalorian is a warrior who just wouldn't hand things over. It'd be like, oh, just make it easy. So yeah, I just felt like the tension that I felt it's been a tension throughout the last 2 seasons, where especially in that second season, it was kind of like you had the feeling that Bo and Mando were going to clash at some point, because they're both working towards the same goal, and only one person can actually get to that point. And that's what Game of Thrones did brilliantly. Obviously, no one likes the last season, but you were invested in both sides, and I think a lot of people watching this would have been invested in both Bo and Mando, which would have caused the tension. And instead of being like, that's the thing that pulls an audience back. They're like, every week they're like, oh, I'm gonna have to keep watching this because I want to know who wins. Whereas now I kind of feel like I'm not that interested anymore, because we have the winner, and there's not that conflict there that I was, because every season kind of needs a villain, which would be Moff Gideon, but he's not really been in this season either. So you would think that the antagonists would be Bo and Mando, you can kind of root for each one of them, and that's robbed now. So it's like, well, what is the threat this season? There's nothing.
Yeah, I mean, not having a macro threat, macro stakes, they're alluding a lot to what the New Republic and the Amnesty, Empire is doing. But like I said, like all of that is happening off screen. All of that is happening behind the scenes. We're not aware of that. We don't know. It's a lot of reading in between the lines. And, I'm wondering, because as you said, like we wanted to see Bo-Katan and Mando clash. I think the way season 2 ended, that was what everyone thought season 3 was going to be. It was going to be Bo out to get Din for the Darksaber. And I'm wondering if, because it would need to be a very climactic 2 major characters facing off against each other, someone probably has to die. And I don't know if Dave or Jon Favreau want to, kill their darlings right now. There's such a beloved of Katie Sackhoff, as Bo-Katan.
You mean kill their IP?
Well, exactly.
Like how many times has Ahsoka Tano been on death's door? Over the years, but they'll never kill her. She's going to be alive 100 years past the rise of Skywalker. Anyways, I cut you off.
Oh no, that's exactly it. And it is so clear that Katie Sackhoff has top billing with Pedro Pascal now on the show. Like she's in it. They ain't killing off either of those, and we all know that they probably have contracts that are like 3, 4, 5 years, in the future. So that really eliminates any level of threat, tension, of stakes without a big bad. And yeah, is Moff Gideon going to appear in the last episode? Who knows? But I wish we knew what they're up against.
Like I said earlier, I don't mind that it turns out that Din is a small part of Bo-Katan's story. I actually love stories where we get to dip our heads in for a second. Do you guys remember Monty Python, The Life of Brian, when Brian falls from the tower and he lands inside of a spaceship and the spaceship goes off into space and it's part of this giant intergalactic battle with these other aliens and they shoot it, crashes to Earth, and then the whole thing was ridiculous and it was a way for him to survive the fall. But just for a second, we got a glimpse into this wider, greater conflict, and then nothing. Those are my favorite kind of stories. So the thing with the Mon Cala and the corn at the beginning, I loved. I loved that there was this Romeo and Juliet romantic soap opera kind of playing out in the background, but it's over there and it's just part of Star Wars, and don't worry about it for now. And so I don't mind that Din and Grogu are just a small part of this retaking of Mandalore, but it does make you think, what is their story then? And I think if they hadn't set up all of these conflicts, we wouldn't care. If Bo-Katan would have seen Din with the Darksaber in season 2 at the end and gone, fuck it, it doesn't, we'll figure it out. That would have been fine. But it did seem like they were setting all of this up. Din and Grogu being apart. She wants the Darksaber. And by the way, if you watch the animated shows, you know that she never really sought the Darksaber. It's not like at the end of Clone Wars, she told Ahsoka Tano, hey, I got to fight Maul because I need the Darksaber. And then when Sabine Wren gives it to her in Rebels, she's like, oh, sweet, cool. And she does the thing where she, raises it over her head. I do think, though, and this is where I want to go back to you, Paul, did you think the episode, minus all that world building stuff, did you think the episode, worked? If this was just, the first episode of a Star Wars show with a detective story and Jack Black and this weird Epcot Center thing, did you like that? Did you follow that?
No. And I have to view it in the context of the season as well. I think there's so many scenes in this season that kind of with random characters that don't really do a lot of Carson Teva last week. Fair enough, he got the distress call from Grief Karga, but I'm thinking, well, that you could have cut out his entire section by just sending the distress call to Mando directly, and then you get rid of all the stuff on Coruscant, him then having to go to the Mandalorians to be like, we've just had a big thing happen, we need a distress call, we need you guys to step in. And that's just kind of the Carson Teva stuff I just didn't really see the point of. The stuff at the start, the Romeo and Juliet thing, didn't really see the point of. And what is what is the point in this droid story that they were telling? They barely touched upon it. I would have loved Blade Runner 2049. I would have loved an episode just based around droids and everything, but they didn't stick with it enough to really develop it. And then at the end of it, They then tack on this thing about Bo taking over the leadership of the old group. That should have been the focus. I think personally that could have been a whole episode, but instead you've got these 4 sections where it's the Romeo and Juliet thing, Jack Black and Lizzo, droid investigation, Bo taking over, and it's just all small chunks of things that are I find underdeveloped, that I think they could have chosen one of those things and made a full episode out of it, but instead we just have small slithers of tiny scenes that don't feel as impactful as they could.
No, I agree with that. I think, that has kind of been my overall thought of this season is the story they are trying to tell is really cool. There is a really cool story in there. It is just so misstructured and underdeveloped, and, there's a lot of required reading to fully grasp everything that, for the folks, like I said, who've been following, all the Star Wars since at least for this show, the original trilogy up through Clone Wars and prequels. I mean, they have it all in here. They have Easter eggs for everything in here. If you're seeing the quote unquote potential, right? There's some cool stuff in here. But in order for a show to be great, it needs to work for, the moms texting their sons, right? who just want
metaphor.
a cute, who want to see the cute baby Yoda with stepdad Din Djarin and their adventures and how the world unfolds around them. And so it is really frustrating seeing the potential for the great storytelling in the show and just see it get squandered time and time again for one-off weird world building moments that are coming at a disservice for the larger characters as a whole.
Yeah, and like I said before, I think part of this is that this episode and this season do not exist in a vacuum. I mean, we have 2 pretty solid, perfect seasons of a show before this. You could argue that season 2 got a little spin-offy, where every episode seemed to be setting up a different spin-off, and then one of those got canceled or they got delayed. So now the other shows are trying to pick it up, and one of the spin-offs, was by far the worst Star Wars show, or at least was the biggest miss. I want to go back real quick on one thing about the droids, though, and this isn't, we don't have to get too far into this, but I do think the worst thing Star Wars could ever do is to start to talk about droid rights, because once you open up that can of worms, it's ugly. It's so unclear. Pop Culture Detective did a great, really depressing video about this called, I think, The Tragedy of Droids. That's about these are sentient slaves who sometimes want to serve, sometimes don't. And, I think the droids are always treated best as this comic relief that you shouldn't think too hard about. Because when you do, you're going to go back and see that, Luke Skywalker and every other hero in the series is not a good guy. I'm personally glad that they just addressed that without actually making it the focus of the episode. But I also liked this whole Law and Order detective story thing. Well, they touched on it, but they did. That's what I mean. I'm glad they didn't go too far into it. The way they touched on it was, correct me if I'm wrong here, the droids didn't feel oppressed. They just wanted to keep existing, right? They were happy to keep fulfilling their function. Well, maybe that's the limit of their intelligence, because Obi-Wan does say, if droids could think, none of us would be here, right? We could all be replaced by them. So maybe there's just something in artificial life in this universe where there is, I don't know if you want to call it the Turing test or consciousness or whatever, they do hit a limit of at least their personal ambition, unless it's programmed in them to be more personally ambitious, like 000, right? So Heather, would you say 000 is a droid who is just programmed to be super evil, or we got into the droid thing?
Yeah, we did. I'll talk droids all day long. 000 was kind of programmed to be evil. He was part of the Tarkin Initiative, right? That was his programming and everything. And I don't know. Again, not to get into too existential debates surrounding AI developing superhuman intelligence and all of this stuff, but one could argue that 000 is this, the superhuman AI that has been developed and realizes that there is no use for humans except to just make them our playthings and torture them, yada yada yada.
But then when you factor in L3 and Solo,
but
yeah,
right,
L3 and Solo is the most depressing story in Star Wars if you look at it too hard. If you go like, oh wow, so she was in love with this human and they forced her consciousness into this ship where she can't talk to anybody and her only function is to be a nav computer. Very sad. So let's not think about that in Star Wars. It's space. It's just space wizards, and don't look at the Blade Runner stuff. But Paul, I get the feeling that you want that. You want your hard sci-fi into AI.
Yeah, Andor would have done it. Mandalorian's just all over the place tonally. I mean, if you touch upon it, I think you should, do it to the best of your ability. I don't think that you should, that's my problem with this episode. It's just small sections of things that are kind of picked up and then dropped, never talked about again. Romeo and Juliet stuff, never talked about again. Jack Black stuff kind of glossed over. Droid stuff picked up, we'll drop it, and then we'll have Bo doing some leadership stuff. So yeah, I just think that if you are going to touch on these concepts, then do them as well as you can, instead of just touching upon them and leaving it for something else that you're also going to kind of meander around and not really get that in depth on.
So is there a way, Paul, I'll ask you this first, is there a way you think that these last 2 episodes can salvage the season? Is there something
definitely.
What do you want to see?
Just keep it tight. I mean, I don't think they should do the Moff Gideon stuff and Dr. Pershing stuff anymore. I think they can kind of drop that and just focus on getting back Mandalore, and just keeping that kind of as the sole focus. And then once they get Mandalore, be like, well, is this even worth having? Because it's a crap heap. There's nothing left. And then you can kind of set up things, maybe in a post-credit scene, show Elia reaching out to Moff Gideon, and then that kind of sets up season 4. And that we know he's alive out there. But I think it would be weird just to have a Moff Gideon episode all of a sudden at episode 7, and then for the finale do the whole thing with Mandalore or fighting Moff Gideon. I don't know. It feels like they will probably do one of those things as well, because Giancarlo Esposito said he's in this season. Originally, he was rumored to be in 4 episodes of it, but obviously that's not true. So yeah, it's weird.
Well, I think they're going to retake Mandalore from him. We had those TIE fighters a few episodes ago, and they had to be attached to some ship. I don't know why Moff Gideon would still care about Mandalore if they got all the Beskar last time, but there might be something. And this is where, we don't know. Heather, I don't remember if it was you or Matt, pointed out that this really does seem like a season that needs to be binged. 1 episode at a time is great for me, but it's really hard to connect all these dots. We might have something these last 2 episodes where Moff Gideon, wants the Mythosaur, because the Mythosaur is this really important thing for Grogu's, or for cloning Palpatine, or whatever the hell it's going to be. And Pershing's on his side now because of what Kane did. It might all come together perfectly in these last couple episodes. I do, they did tease this whole thing, though, where Mandalorians were either framed or they helped Moff Gideon escape, which I think they did. I think similar to how some Mandalorians were loyal to Darth Maul, there's going to be some that are loyal to Moff Gideon. We also have that mysterious evil Mandalorian helmet in the opening credits that's shaded in red. So maybe Moff Gideon has his own Mandalorian armor. I don't know. Heather, what do you think? Can these last 2 episodes really stick the landing and bring it all together?
No, just I think they're gonna have some cool stuff. I think we're gonna, as per tradition now, we're gonna get some cameos of characters that might not have seen in live action before, or whatever. But I think they might stick the landing in a binge format, right? But just as isolated episodes, given the track record of what the creative team behind these shows are capable of doing, I don't know. I really don't know. I want to be optimistically hopeful, but what is it? Being a cynic means you're either always right or pleasantly surprised, and I really hope I'm pleasantly surprised.
Would you call yourself a Star Wars cynic, though? Because in a lot of our conversations, like I said, you always seem to walk away with the love of the universe, and I'm the same way. At least, like every Star Wars I see, I usually like on some level. unless you can very clearly see the puppet strings and that it's a movie, which is what Rise of Skywalker was for me. So are you having fun?
I'm having fun. I think, there's a lot that, because of my profession where I've been behind the scenes and know a lot of things that, and a lot of story elements and plot points that I can't really discuss here. I see a lot of strings being pulled in this show. And so I think with this show in particular, I am cynical a little bit, but as you said, I love Star Wars, and there's a lot that's happening that I do really love, and I'm excited for, and, I want to love Star Wars so much that I'm going to enjoy it no matter what. I know you didn't particularly like Lizzo showing up, Paul. I thought it was weird as hell, but also
it was weird. It was weird.
But I'm sitting there and I'm like, you know what? She just wanted to hold baby on it, and she got to. Good for her. I'm really happy for her.
She's not even that good of an actor, but she was a presence.
Yeah.
Yeah, if she would have been...
I hated that
it's so
CG,
weird, 'cause
whatever dress thing. That was so distracting.
That I
was
loved.
so distracting.
That I thought was a great design choice. And props to New Rockstars. They put out a video about VFX and Marvel versus Star Wars, and did a great job of bringing up that you can tell the people who work on Star Wars stuff, though, the VFX teams, they're mostly in-house at Lucasfilm at ILM. They love Star Wars, and I do think you see things that we found an Easter egg in this last one. There's Arbesh that says this means nothing, but the fans will probably interpret it. They're doing all these little things in there, for us, and just because they
watch your
love
channel.
Star Wars so much.
They watch your channel.
I think they're watching right now. We see you guys. Well, I want to thank both of you for joining me. Paul, where can the people find you?
Heavy spoilers. That's it. Just heavy spoilers everywhere.
And yep, after you watch our breakdowns, go check out Paul's. So just make sure you watch ours first.
If you've watched Ryan's breakdown, you've seen a better version of mine.
Thanks, Paul. Heather, where can the people find you?
At Heather Antos on all the things.
And we want to hear from all of you down in the comments below, or feel free to @ any of us on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe, smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.